Well, hello there, everyone. Welcome back. It's like for how to finish, and basically this activity right here basically talks about is to where about higher education, and based on about when we're sleeping. So I know that any kids that maybe weren't to where that you've heard that before to where you're at least you're required to get at least eight up to eight to maybe six or six and a half, maybe up to 10 hours or so of sleep per night, up to at least 8 hours and you're like Warrant, to where half the time that if you're working on something and you may not be able to remember later on and knowing about really if it's all about is to where maybe that another type of a sleeping habit, or if it was maybe because it just so much going on to where you just cannot remember any other reason like that. But you talk about right here is a study, a research about to how to finish, and I know like for like any work that we're working on, we want to where how is it that we get tend to where that we know that if like you come knowing about coming up to a finish point, especially that anybody that like want to where especially if you've been out of school for quite a long time. But you see right here is that this right here will be some pictures right here of me, and then this one right here will be of me when I will be sleeping. And I know like with anybody that they're warned to where that some stuff that you may not be able to remember remember especially, but on your hand, that talk about right here is to where what's maybe the question could go by is to where what source of vitamins are we getting while we're sleeping, and as well as for what's going on while we're sleeping. So if anybody were to warrant to where that have right here for 12 hours, where 12 hours this could also mean is to where that that something that more likely that we were working on and don't happen right away, and you're like warrant to where well what's going on, and then I say it's like like wait until about maybe 12 hours. I guess maybe 12 hours is that the same thing as maybe a couple of hours, but I'm like a couple of hours usually means between 3 or 4 hours at the most. But your time have right here is like for 12 hours. So basically it's like 8 hours, sleep for 8 hours, and if it takes about maybe an hour or two up to 3 hours just to get ready, just to get ready for something, or maybe to prepare for something or something like that. So you're like Warren to where anybody that may warrant this to where that it happens to most of us to where when we sleep in, especially when we oversleep. And I know I've gotten mad a couple of times about that, about whenever if I were to oversleep, and sometimes I guess it basically means that your body is trying to get caught up on some sleep that maybe you missed from the previous night, as well as for how hard you were working. Well, on your hand that you talk right here is that with this picture right here of me, and I know that a lot of times, like with anybody, that if you're going to be attending school, that you may have your problems with tardiness, and not just because that you were watching TV or something like that, like watching TV, but one of those. I can tell you by here, I was watching TV, a couple of times those nights, but on the other hand, that like are like warrant toward it, especially whenever you oversleep, that sometimes it seems like to where that, I guess your body, it's like I guess a habit to where that basically that your body is trying to catch up on sleep, especially. But we weren't to where the type of work that more that's being done while we're sleeping. So if we're like weren't, we have right here as me when I was dressed, if I were to be dressed, if I were to be what you call maybe just getting up, or maybe cuddled up in a blanket or something like that. But see right here is that with this right here, it talks about it's like for higher education. So we're like weren't to where that whenever we think about this right here, that I would maybe more likely be wide awake in this picture right here and working on something, but then this picture right here was to where I'll be sound asleep. So if anybody were wondering, to where back in the New Year's of '84 of 1984, around Christmas time of 1984, that knowing about I'm like really for who was still awake, really to nuance about it's like for whenever the clock that comes to midnight. So especially on New Year's, and you're like warned to where the for whoever that's still awake or whoever's asleep, but sometimes that we weren't, or that why is it that sounds, so, it's like you're missing something. And I know, like with anybody, that if they were asleep, and then they may think as to where that anything that maybe that they were missing, especially one of those could be as to where maybe updates, or maybe something, maybe in the sky that they may have missed, or maybe anything else that was going on, especially. So I know a couple of nights that when I was about maybe 10, 11, 12 years old, that I can remember that, especially it was on New Year's, on New Year's night, that I can remember that I fell asleep, I think watching TV or something, and woke up about 4 or 5 hours later and find out that, that they were all, the family, and we were all doing like some type of New Year's celebration, where we would do, like, say, the paper confetti and all that. And then woke up one I think it was about maybe 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, something like that, whenever I woke up and find out that a lot of people, they already had their, they had their celebrations. But on the other hand, that we weren't, to where that anybody that may weren't, or that, all kinds of things that could be going on while you're sleeping. It's like while you're sleeping, that thinking about is to where that so far as source of higher education. Whenever you're sleeping, I guess it basically means is you're putting your body in rest. And we're like, word, to where that don't mean is to where that, well, it don't mean, it does not mean to where that don't sleep at all, or that if it's anything about, we may wonder toward it. And sometimes that people that may be trying to, man, you're trying to handle it, to where if they're going to have maybe a few sleepless nights, and you're like trying to understand about, that, I was going to say that, you're not tired enough to fall asleep or anything like that. So you're like worrying about that, as to where whenever you are sleeping, that knowing about anything that's going on, especially. And some that may say is to where, that a few things that you may not be able to remember either. So if anybody has ever heard that before about sleepwalking, or if it's anything about maybe like any other type of sleeping habits, but this right here will be a drawing right here of me, as if I were to be like, I would probably say about age 2 years old. I'll probably say, age 2 right here. So if anybody warns this story, age 2. I was about age 2 in this drawing right here. So think about with me though, while I was sleeping, that a lot of things were going on. One of those could be is toward that, I don't know if anybody has had those dreams about, while you were doing your homework, while you were doing your homework, that you may have fallen asleep maybe during a movie or some sort. I don't know if anybody has ever fallen asleep maybe during a film or a movie, and then by the time you wake up, it was all over with, and then you're like, warned to where, okay, well, what happened? Well, what happened at the end, or so anybody that may warrant to where, that anything that you may not be able to remember right away, it seems like, to where it comes to the point to where that maybe you were sleeping, you would say, well, you were kind of awake and kind of asleep, but how do we, how do doctors really explain that? And you're like, warrant, or anything that you may not be able to remember right away, anything that may not be happening right away, and half the time it just seems like that, you're dreaming, or you're daydreaming, or anything about, you were half asleep and half awake. But and I guess the best answer more likely would be is toward that, that anything that you're trying to catch up on. And I know, like, that with anybody, that that there may be a lot of things about you that, like with me, though, with my higher education, I keep thinking that there's a lot of things that maybe I missed, but then there may be some things that maybe other people that may say that they missed about my story, as well as like about my what's been going on with me, with my case, and as well as with anything about, for any other source of information that's going on, such as if it's going to be anything work, or if it's going to be anything related to, like, any other cases, or any other source of information, stuff like that. Education especially. So top life for higher education. And when we do sleep at night, it's like it may be part of during the day that we weren't, or that, that some that may think is to feel is to where that the number of times that they worked hard on something and find out that yeah, if that information is improving your educational skills, or if it basically feels like it's toward it. If you can't remember some of the stuff that you learned from the last week's sessions or so, from the last week's study hour, that more likely is to where it's erased. And some that may say that it may feel that way, but I don't think that's really the case. It just, I guess sometimes it just basically means is to where that just to kind of understand a little bit about what you learn about, especially knowing about that. Yeah, that I guess if we likely think about it, if we would actually do the math right here, of like here for 12 hours. So the things that more likely that you could be doing within the 12 hours, and then that the rest of the 12 hours out of the day that you could be resting and then thinking about is to where that with all that you still remember from whenever you were in school, for higher education, as well as anything else that you're working on for basic training. And we may think about necessarily to where while we're sleeping, and then we wake up and then find out that maybe we are cannot recognize what's going on or changes that's going on. And I know that and I know from the other previous video talk about what changes. So you're like Warrant, to where while you're sleeping that you may wake up and then thinking that a few changes that maybe you don't realize are happening, and it seems like a real nervous situation. And I know with me though that I could probably say is to where that if I were to wake up and find out anybody like Warren to where that yeah, that I don't know if we've woken up that we were maybe if we came to that situation to where that we may have fallen asleep maybe on the floor or maybe on a couch or something like that, and we were meaning to fall asleep in the bedroom or so, or let's just say if you woke up maybe in a doctor's office or anything like that, or maybe you went to school, you fell asleep while you were in school or some sort. So things about is to where that about sleeping habits, especially to where that if you had a long day and you wind up falling asleep, you're doing something. But on the other hand, knowing about it's like for safety wise especially. But on the other hand, that we weren't to where that while we were sleeping and just think about the things that more likely that have been able to accomplish, especially able to finish. And sometimes it seems like to where that we may warrant to where yeah, well, you know maybe not everything. You're like Warrant to where it seems like it's all about, like say, the mystery study about is to where that whenever you're working on something and then that you wake up but you fall asleep for about maybe 4 hours and you wake back up and find out that half the work was done. And for that reason it seems like uploading a file is another example too, is to where I'm sure anybody will likely learn to where if you're going to be using a real slow internet speed, then you may fall asleep for about maybe 3 hours, until the upload is ready, or maybe until the processing is ready, and you may fall asleep for 3 hours, and then you wake up and you're like, you may even forget about the fact about for what you see, on the computer or so, or what you were working on, and until you actually look at it for a few seconds, you're like, oh, well, wait, so how's it going? But and then you see on like yeah, well, if it's completed or if anything else that went on especially. So if this was right here was me right here, and anybody wanted to where I could have maybe added a lot more color to it, as well as like any type of visual special effects. But if this was right here was me right here, if I were to be sleeping, and have right here is a pacifier right here. If I had a pacifier in my mouth, whenever I was about 1 or 2 years old. But this right here would be right here is me right here sleeping. So if anybody wanted to, or if I would be laying in bed, or you're like wanted to, or yeah, that whenever you're sleeping that you dream about stuff. And one of those could be is toward yeah, that some of them could be maybe what you call nightmares. Some of them that would be called your weird dreams that don't make sense or anything like that. Some that may say that whenever you dream though, that whenever you're having these weird dreams about stuff that really just don't make no sense, I guess that there's like what you call a type of study about that, as to where anybody, like say maybe even doctors and and counselors can maybe talk about, as to where that I guess some of these dreams may mean something, but then they're just I guess it's all about in the nervous system, and as well as and about I guess the biggest fear or maybe the concerns or anything like that that you're having go with, especially that anything that you could be concerned about, especially one of those could be about education. And I don't know if anybody has had any dreams about getting married or anything like that, or maybe running a business, or having a nice home or a nice car or anything like that. But on the other hand, too, some of these dreams that whenever they go on, and sometimes at the ending, the ending to the dreams that don't make no sense. And sometimes, if you were while you were sleeping, that you were woken up maybe by alarm clock, or maybe by a phone call, or if it was anything that was related to something important or some sort, and any necessary reasons, and thinking that you didn't know whatever happened to the rest of the dream, because you had whenever you woke up that you were and that some may say that it's happened many times to where if you were to oversleep about something, and whenever you oversleep, and then that you had to get up one morning and rush off and try rush try to get ready to go for where you need to go, and sometimes even a doctor's appointments. And think about it toward if you're going to be running a little bit late to a doctor's appointment, especially. But on the other hand, I guess the question goes by as to where that really is it our fault, if something happens to where if we do oversleep. And I know, like what they say that sleep's important, and if you oversleep, you like I say, if you were supposed to get up at a certain time, and if you slept about maybe an hour or two longer, then thinking about as to where if that's your fault or not. But they likely say as to where, well, you got to go to bed earlier, but sometimes you may not be able to fall asleep right away either. But on the other hand, I guess there's like what you're so far saying is to where I guess it's good to go to bed a little earlier, and as well as for I guess you say for how your body works, especially is to where that they like warrant to where if you are able to get up on time, and then you may warrant to where that while you feel kind of what you call sleepy, loopy, or so drowsy during the day, but on the other hand, this right here would be a picture right here of, like anybody say that if you're going to have a parent, taking this picture right here and think about, okay, Matthew, okay, little sleepy head or something like that, little, look at that cute little face, or hello, sleepy Matthew, it's time to get up now. Like, it's time to get up now. But on the other hand, that talk right here is like if this was right here was me whenever I was sleeping, and anybody like wanted toward it getting up for for on a school day or some sort, and like to how to finish, so that like with anybody that they will be waking up and find out about a number of things that never changes, especially that may be going on, and maybe that it's kind of scaring the kid, especially like anybody like Warrant, to where if anybody has had those mornings to where they wake up, like that they smell orange juice, that they have breakfast or something like that they have breakfast, wake up morning, and then they eat breakfast, and sometimes they're like thinking about is to where that the stuff that's going on about with the type of their brain that say with their thinking and their brain power, and as well as for what they do, and some things that we like weren't to where if there's been any changes or not based on for what we can remember about for anything that we were doing during the school day, and have right here is me right here for anything that works on its own, especially. So whenever we think about this, we are like wondering to her that what exactly is going on with our education, maybe while we're sleeping, and it's like give it 12 hours, but still, that some may say that yep, while you were sleeping, that there has been some improvements and maintenance, as well as upgrades going on. So it seems like to where that really that if a kid were to get sick, and then that a lot of times that they say that your body needs to rest in order if you're going to be sick with something. And then on your hand too, it's like for schoolwork. If you're going to be sleeping for about maybe 8 hours, and sometimes it seems like to where that how that works is to where that you're upgrading the way that your brain functions, as well as for how well that you're learning. You're upgrading about your social skills just by sleeping. And some that may say that that I guess if you want to call it that, that there's a meaning of like for upgrade is to where that you are basically teaching your I guess you say is like that the stuff from the study time, and from how everything was worked out. It's like for the training, basic training and study hours from what all that you remember from whenever you were going to school. And we're like Warrant, to where that back whenever you started, it seems like to where you kind of want to know about what all has changed, especially if you were sleeping. And I know like anybody that may Warrant, to where especially while you were sleeping, you're like Warrant, to where what has changed, but anything that you may have missed especially. So if this was right here was me right here, and let's say if I were to wake up one morning and find out that there was something that maybe I think that I missed. And one of those will be to where that you get your grade report and find out that if the grades are going to be what you call stabilized, or if they're going to be like what you call something that you turned in but you don't remember turning it in. So you're like worried to where that at the time you're like, well, what's going on here? I'm like, well, I wonder what's this or what's that. So we may not be able to remember everything, especially that whenever while we were sleeping, that things that more likely that could have taken effect as well. But on the other hand, I guess maybe doctors will more likely say, as to where any counselors may say that it's not really supposed to be anything that's real concerning of the matter. And some may say, well, maybe in a way it is, because knowing about what all I can remember, because that it felt a lot like that like I was dreaming about. I was asleep. I don't know. I cannot remember that time because I was asleep. So especially between January and December or so of the year, like especially around New Year's, is to where, or if we want to say maybe our birthday or so, between the time the clock that comes to midnight, that we weren't, to where there are a number of things that go on within the 12 hours. It's like while you're sleeping, that we got some new information. It's like some updated information, and then you're like, we weren't, to where this all right here, it all seems like kind of like a dream right here, to where that you're like wanting, to where that whenever you wake up and you see some changes that's going on, and you're just not used to it. So these changes may be very little changes. They may not be very big changes. Some of them could be very small changes. But some of these changes could be slightly coming into effect, to where that's improving your learning, and as well as for anything else that needs to be done especially. And I know, like with anybody like me, is to where whenever I wake up those couple mornings and think about, is to where that some things that I may not remember doing, or if they work or not. I know, like with anybody, that they may say, what are you frustrated about over the fact about while I was working on something, I did not know if it was going to work or not. So you're like wanting, to where that you were just kind of testing it just to see what happened. It's like with any kids that whenever they start working on something, you're like thinking, well, I don't know if this is going to work, but go ahead and try it and see what happens. And then by the time something works, and you may find the answer within about maybe 48 hours or so later on about anything that went on, and you're like wanting, to where, oh no, well, I'm like worried, to where, well, I don't think this is going to work or not. And some that may say that, well, hopefully it don't work, because if it does work, and more likely, then people are going to be paying their attention towards me, knowing about that, for anything else, that maybe any information that maybe I may know. But I mean, that's just, I don't know if that's really a scary situation or something to be proud of. But on your hint to, if anything about our study, though, is to where anybody like wanted, to where, what are you talking about? I was asleep during that time. I can, well, that don't mean that your work was, your work that somebody else that more likely that seen what you were working on, and that they actually took interest in that, or anything else, that any information that maybe other people would like to collect as well. But to do interviews or something like that on. But on the other hand, that really, that I guess the question goes by, is to where does sleep really count towards anything that we're working on? And some doctors that may say, is to where that that while you were sleeping, that basically to put your body to rest, and that means, is to where that that for anything anything that more likely that you need to do, and they may say that yeah, well, spend about maybe 5 or 10 hours a day on it, and then while you're sleeping, and then you're like Warrant, or anything that's going on with your work that's showing some type of improvement as well. And that could also maybe mean is to where that there's other people who do take interest in what you're doing, and then they may say is, yep, while you were sleeping, and they may say that, yep, while you were sleeping, that we went ahead and what you call promoted your work, or we went ahead and like you provide the information. It's like some of the information that was provided from earlier was automatically updated. So you're like one to where that whenever you were working on something, and the next thing you know, it's like, yeah, the information that you were working on from earlier, from last week or so, was automatically updated, and you're like, what information? Oh, that information. Well, I'm not sure if it's correct or not, but that's the best what I can do. But on the other hand, talk about here is like you say for tutoring hours, as well as for anything that more likely that any student be able to remember, especially. So at the time you're like wanting to, or whenever you're ready, especially. But you have right here is my student picture right here, and you have right here is me right here sleeping. So if anybody were wanted to, were that I'm like, yeah, that any kids that they while they were sleeping that they're thinking about us, to, or sometimes that they may think that while they were sleeping, and somebody that may tell them, yep, while you were sleeping, that we've been in the kitchen cooking breakfast, or getting things ready, or if it was anything about maybe getting your school stuff all packed up and ready for you to go to school the next morning, or something like that. So anybody that may warrant already, yeah, that while you were sleeping, that somebody or something was doing the work, part of the work for us. And that seems to me like a lot. It sounds a lot like to me like somebody not really about doing the work for us, but giving us some sort of of attention, as well as helping us out for helping that person out for what needs to be done, especially. So just think about it, to where anybody that may be dreaming about something that does have to work for us, and you're like Warren, to where that especially if you're going to be working hard enough, and thinking that somebody else that may have gotten very interested in what you were doing, especially, and they may say that, yep, well, while you were sleeping, that we and yeah, that especially anybody say that while you were during that week that you were sick, maybe with the cold or the flu or something like that, that we were doing like the cover up work for you, to where that we came in here those couple of times out of a week, just to do more of the work. And so you're like Warren, to where that anything that we're working on, especially, and thinking about, is to where a lot of things that we not be able to remember. And one of those could be is to where that like, well, I must have been daydreaming, or I must have been sleeping, or something, which I think I was asleep. So, and I know it like with anybody, especially if they're going to be too young to really to remember, or maybe too young really to realize what's going on, that yeah, they could be what you call, if you want to call it, maybe a little bit spaced out. But a lot of things that's going on during any time, anything, maybe a festival or some like some place like ours, maybe some situation that's going on, a meeting or something like that. You could maybe be in a meeting that you don't quite understand what they're talking about. So it seems a lot like, to where that they may say is to where that's how the brain works, especially. But on the other hand, that it seems like to where that's whenever kids that want to find something to where somebody else that wants to pay attention to. So you're like learn to where, yeah, well, if you think that I missed this or I missed that, well, I need to catch up on something. Then maybe there's something about me that you missed too. So if anybody were warned, or that has anybody argued about that? Has anybody argued about for who needs to catch up on whose work, or is like those that person's work? It's like anything that you may have missed about me that when I have missed about you, or anything like that. But on the other hand, that you have right here for 12 hours as well for Matthew sleeping, and then you have right here is like talk about here with the picture right here, and then you have right here is like you talk about for higher education from back in 1989. So anybody that may want to, where yep, it's like you make sure we get plenty of rest, especially. But so far as how to finish, and you're like Warren, to where that yeah, that for anything that you're trying to finish, and you're like thinking about something's missing here. Like yep, where you may have been asleep during that time, but you're like Warrant to where that yeah that anybody they may warrant to where what do we call it? What you call it? I could type a nightmare, but we may think that a nightmare basically means is to where that you're getting real behind on something and something that's not working out your way, and especially that you have these moments as to where stuff that starts getting really out of control. So in order to be able to help that is to where that they say is to where that yeah, to try to take it one thing at a time, especially. But anyway, but talk about here is like to how to finish, about while we're sleeping, especially, about the things that are more likely to help improve our credit and our grade scores, as well as our credit, anything else that we're working on, especially. But there are, it's like talk about, say, for how to finish, say, for higher education. Man, make 25, and thanks for watching.